Hi, welcome to If These Heels Could Talk. I'm JoyGenea with Solutions by JoyGenea.
I'm Michelle with Bad Cat Digital, and we are perennially surprised when this setup actually works.
It's so exciting.
It's like, oh my gosh,
we won! But that's not what we're talking about.
Today we're talking about losing. I hate losing.
I was gonna say I don't think about it that much.
I'm very competitive.
I think I quit before I can lose. That's actually been my MO. If you look back into sports and stuff in school, as soon as I assessed I was not as good as the other people, it wasn't, how can I get there? It was, I'll just quit now because I'm not going to ever be there.
Interesting.
Well, I only had so much energy, okay? And I had to focus it on figuring out how to spell. So I really had to assess the situation. It's like, do you have the energy for this? No. Okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'll be here.
I do something similar with new things, but I'm just extraordinarily competitive. Like I'm really competitive.
I once wound up in I don't remember why or house. Oh, my friend married into a family and they were all getting together. Somehow I wound up at a function with all of these people. I'd never seen competitiveness at that level. Like we were playing the game of Monopoly and I swore my life was on the line.
Yeah, probably.
And I did quit.
This is why we don't play Monopoly.
Yeah.
Because your life would be on the line.
That's just it. I don't know how to even compete at that level. So I'm like, I'm out. Like this is way over. Like this is a game. I want to be having fun. When did this go south on me?
Well, but the thing is that two competitive people, being competitive is fun.
Right. And they were feeding off of it. Right. It was awesome. And I was just like,
you feed off the energy.
and
you get to like smack talk each other.
Yeah, there was a whole thing going on, and I was not part of it.
Fun. When you're a competitive person, it's no fun playing against somebody who's not. And, and you have to kind of like, I pull back when I'm playing with somebody who's not very competitive.
That's nice.
But I do. Like, I'm not as loud. I'm not as energetic.
Goes down
I don't.
Bit.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't.
That's nice. These people could not regulate.
It's no fun to beat up on people. You know, if people aren't giving it back, it's no fun to give it. Nice. Dish it out. Like that's just gross and rude. The thing that drives me crazy though is when another person is competitive and then they accuse me of being competitive like it's a bad thing.
Oh,
that drives me nuts. And that's how it usually happens with men.
Oh, yeah.
Like my now father-in-law, the first time we met after he asked my now husband if we were going to get a prenup. So it started well.
I was going to say the competitiveness started off right away.
It started off well. Yeah. But we played, I don't know, spades or something. And he's competitive. And my husband's not. Like, he doesn't really care. But I'm competitive. And so I was getting into the spirit of it because you can sense it in each other.
Yes. I've watched it evolve in people. And I'm like,
he turns to my husband and he's like, wow, she's a competitive one, isn't she? And I was like, oh, F you. I'm out. Whatever. Like you're not sitting over there just mad because a girl beat you.
Yeah. Well, and maybe they're not as accustomed to seeing a little toe-to-toe competition.
Well, and you know what? Fine.
From our gender.
But maybe like respect it.
Oh yeah. Maybe that was his way of respecting it in a little bit.
Maybe
I was gonna say, in a competitive way.
Yeah, not talking to me, but about me in front of me.
So I had to grow this muscle, the losing muscle. And actually being a little more competitive. I had to grow that muscle when I went into business because I didn't have it. And so I was losing. I was losing business and my clients were walking all over me. Especially the competitive ones, like when it came to the pricing and that kind of stuff, I was just...
So do you then associate competitiveness with assertiveness?
At times.
Okay.
At times. But I will tell you, they are different. And luckily I had chance for, anyways, I don't remember what the class was. Anyways, I got to go through a really intense training a few years ago, and they made us recognize that someone being competitive is in no way a negative thing right off the bat. Like you have to assess that under different things. And it was really interesting once we segregated ourselves into our groups of who was really comfortable with conflict and who wasn't. And so they were looking at, and I was in the group of people not comfortable with conflict.
Right.
And it was funny. So they gave us,
which is a much larger group of people.
It was, by the way, we outnumbered them
especially
in Minnesota, in central Minnesota. Okay. We outnumbered them 3-1.
Yes.
But it was still a great conversation because they put out different scenarios. We explained how we would operate around them. And we took offense to what they did. Like we took that personally. Like what they said they would do, we're like, oh, we would take that personally. Like you had offended us. And then we would back down and they're just like, no, what we're doing is that. So it was really, it was very eye-opening. It was really good for me. And so that actually was one of the best things I could have done to understand that different mindset. And now I can actually like think about it a little differently. And when those moments come up in board meetings and those kind of things, I'm learning don't back down. I'm learning that is not an aggressive front towards me and it is not personal. It's actually, we're having communication.
Right.
In their language, not my language. But I mean, it takes a little while to kind of figure that out.
So it took me 3 years of therapy to be able to sit here and say, wow, I am competitive and associate it with assertiveness and not aggression, ambition and not unkindness. It took me a long time.
Oh, you'd put layers of negative on it.
Well, I didn't. They were put on for me very early on.
But you took them on as beliefs.
It was it was always stated in such a derogatory and critical way that I was competitive. You're too competitive. You're so competitive. Why are you so competitive? Oh. Calm down. You're too competitive.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. And so unlearning that. I mean, and I don't mean just as a child. I mean into my mid-30s. And so unlearning that and finding the things about, because I am competitive, that brings with it some behaviors that serve me and some behaviors that don't.
Depending on the situation.
Depending on who I'm with. Yeah. So understanding my competitiveness and what it brings to my life has helped me understand how to control it in other ways where it doesn't serve me well.
I think that's true of a lot of our strengths. A lot of our strengths. They can also be weaknesses if they're used wrong or not understood.
If they're attempted to be like hammered out of somebody.
Yes. And when it's who you are, when it's part of
when
your
it's
DNA,
just a core personality.
One of the things I love about your competitiveness, because it's as obvious as hell meeting you within first few minutes. Not right. This is a character. Like this is part of your character traits. Yes. Like this is who you are.
It's just part of who I am.
I love it. Is not a passive aggressive.
No,
my form of competitiveness would be passive aggressive. The I'll join, but oh wait, I've assessed I can't win, so I'll just quit. That's a very passive aggressive. It's a very passive aggressive approach. To competitiveness. And it's not. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but it's taken me a long time to acknowledge that behavior and that way I'm assessing things, because we're both assessing what's going on in the situation. You're trying to figure out how to win. I'm figuring out, can I win? And then if I don't think I can, it's not even, what could I do to win? Do I want to win? I don't even ask any of that. I'm like, where's the exit?
Well, and I also define winning differently than a lot of people do. I don't define winning by other people losing, and I don't define winning. Like what I'm aiming at is bigger than an ego thing. It's not just, I want to feel better about myself, therefore I want to win. It's different than that. And so other people get to win too. And I truly celebrate.
Isn't it fun when we can put together win-wins?
I love that so much. Like part. That's the goal, right?
Right.
Like how does everybody win?
But here's the beauty. Most of the time, that's not how it gets to work out.
Yep.
And we lose.
Yes.
And
that's true.
I've stopped running out the door.
Yep.
It turns out that's not a respectful way to treat people.
And I've stopped having temper tantrums inside my own mind.
Yes. Which accidentally leak out
which
from time to time.
sometimes leak out on other people.
It just happens that way. And instead, there are better ways to lose gracefully.
So what are some of yours?
I'm learning to bow out when I'm over my head. Okay. And I'm not going to bring on the staff to stretch to where that client wants to go.
Sure.
Or I can tell it's not in my wheelhouse.
Sure.
And this person I need to help them be somewhere else. Yeah. I'm learning and to not take that personally, to not just take that personally. How can it be a win-win for both of us?
So how is bowing out when it's more than you're willing to do different from backing away when you know you're going to lose?
The integrity.
And the intention.
Yep, the intention and the integrity.
Yes.
I have their needs as a best interest and mine.
Gotcha.
What is best for all of us,
yes.
for the whole package moving forward, instead of what's just best for me so I don't get hurt. Right. That a lot of that behavior, by the way, for me was I can only handle so much more pain.
Sure.
I'm going to get out now.
And I'm choosing not this.
I'm just like, this isn't it.
And this game of spades is not going to be a part of that.
It's just like, nope, this whatever sport we're in right now. And no, it's like, I ain't going to be it either.
Yeah.
How about you? Tell me about what you're learning in the process of losing gracefully and what that looks like.
I focus on the positives of who's winning. So especially because the worst for me is games, card games. Like it's not even business stuff. Business stuff is easy. But like I go play card games with my best friend once a week. Okay. And we play a very specific game and I usually win. And it had gotten ridiculous, like to the point where there was something wrong with the way the game was set up. Oh. So I was winning literally every time. Oh my. So we switched some things with the rules because it's one of those games that has like house rules. Okay. So we switched a few things around to rebalance the game. Yeah. And that was good. I'm glad we did it. I'm not in any way. Right. Right. And then on Sunday I lost. And it was close. And I lost a close game. And I didn't focus on the fact that I was losing or that it wasn't fair or that the cards weren't falling my way, because that's really all it was. Good. I focused on how happy I was that she was winning. Nice. Because she's my friend and I love her and I want her to win and I want her to be happy. Yeah. And I don't want our time together to be constantly marred by her belief or her experience. Her experience of always losing. Like seriously, if I were on her end, it would be like, oh, let's play cards so Michelle can win and I'll just be in the room. Yeah. Like that's just not. Yeah. So. Oh, that's cute. Yeah. So it was actually actively costing her to continue to participate. So when we rebalanced the game, and I'm really glad we did that because now we get to keep enjoying it. Yes. And I can focus on how happy I am for her that she won. That's kind of groundbreaking for me. And I lost very well. She even complimented me on how well I lost. Gross. But really, that is a microcosm of losing gracefully in a larger sense. I also pass on the things that aren't in our wheelhouse. Am really honest about the things that I know we can do well, the things that we can't, and really focused on, I say it when we talk about SEO, entering the races we know we can win. Yeah. And so knowing that we're a good fit for somebody, knowing that the project fits in our wheelhouse, those are the ones that are hard to lose. Yeah. Yeah. And I get really excited when, especially I've like previously lost something and they've gone with somebody else. And then a year later, it circles back around because there was something about it that wasn't right then. and now is.
That's a perfect example of losing gracefully. And I've had people do this when they've lost a contract, like when they've applied for something, they've still sent a thank you.
Yeah.
And sometimes they even ask, was there one thing we could have done differently? We'd like to learn from this. And if we have a moment, I've helped people just feel that, this thing right here, like really for us, this was like a deciding factor, just so you know. And whatever they do with that information, but I get as a business owner, you do want to learn from those things, but it makes a difference. It does. It makes a difference how you lose and how you handle like that transition. You and I can both talk about how when people switch website companies, honestly, old website companies will just ghost you. We'll ghost clients. We can't get access to the things we need to get access to. This is how it was back when I was doing it.
Right.
I'm assuming it stayed the same.
Of course it's the
All
same.
of a sudden, these people drop off the face of the earth. You have to become a micro stalker.
Yeah. You have to stalk them to the point where we stopped trying to get all of that launch stuff that we needed in the 2 weeks before the launch date. And we started trying to get it right at the beginning.
And it can take months. And so it doesn't stop anything from happening until we get to the launch. But if we don't start it 8 weeks ago, it's going to delay the launch. So what do you think people are saying? This is what I don't understand from their perspective. What do you think people are saying about your company for the 8 weeks they're attempting to get you to return a phone call, respond to an email? Like I think about
that's short-term and long-term, right? That's short-term, long-term thinking. Like if you're thinking in the short term, then you're thinking, I'm not spending another minute on this former client who's not paying me anymore. So I'm not even going to look up their old password because I don't even really know where it is. I'm not going to put any effort in because they're not paying me anymore. But that whole
time, your past client is saying things, writing things, expressing their loathing for you.
But that's why we focus on long term and we think that way. Other people don't think like that. They think like, no, we're not doing it because you're not paying us.
And
we're not doing it because you're not paying us.
I'm not saying there's not a clause in my contract when I did websites that said if you want to transfer out, there's going to be a fee, and it will depend on from here to here. It'll be a range depending on how we need to be involved in your transfer.
Right.
But that's been really helpful because everybody understands then, this is going to take a bunch of your time when the time comes. And I'm like, it might not take much. You might have a really good person you're upgrading to. Super. Yeah. That's great. You also might be handing this over to your
cousin's boyfriend's dog walker.
Right. And if that is the case, I'm going to be holding their hand the whole time.
Right.
And I will do that because we've now talked about it in the beginning.
Right.
And then I don't actually feel like I'm losing at that point. If that's a priority for them, I am grateful to be helping them help somebody else, and maybe they'll turn out great.
Sure.
I haven't seen it yet, but I love that they're willing to invest in them every time. Like I love that. And I'm like, give them a chance because
can we do a podcast about hiring your daughter to run your website, or your son, or your cousin's kid, or like, who didn't study
marketing?
Can we do maybe it's just a quick PSA. Will you please stop assuming that because somebody is 22, they're qualified to do this work?
Right.
And then let's move on. We can move on from there, but that's all we need to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've now been informed.
Yes.
What's another way we lose? I think I lose gracefully sometimes in board meetings and
you're incredibly diplomatic, and you're very good at just closing your mouth and letting the conversation go where it's going to go because you said the thing that you needed to say and nobody listened to you. So you're done. You give up You give up the ghost very gracefully because it is a ghost.
Unless I want to die on that hill.
Right.
I have learned if I want to die, like if I believe in it that much, I'm going to get in there.
Right.
And
you'll say, this is a hill I will die on.
I will. You're right. Yeah. I will stand on it and claim it. But it's got to be that. Otherwise, you're right. Yeah. I'm like, nope. This isn't, I'm not going to fight it.
I told you that it was stupid to name it that way.
Yep.
You decided to name it that way anyway. That's the end of the conversation.
How about you when it comes to board meetings and like committee
I'm really
meetings?
bad at it. I'm really bad at it.
So you're growing on that one yet?
I'm still growing on that one.
You're young yet, though. See, I've learned if you start to bring something up, like I've got an idea, that means it's your idea and you're now the head of a committee. So you be real careful about those things.
Well, so yes. And I think that there are some things that have changed. I think there's been a generational shift. I don't feel the need to agree with everybody in a meeting. I don't feel the need to stop talking. I don't get interrupted as much as I think women used to. The concept of men interrupting to mansplain or take over the idea, or it still happens. It's happened to me a couple of times, but it doesn't happen much anymore.
Yeah.
And
I would agree. I'm seeing the same type of thing.
And so I think that my experiences with it have been low enough that to me, those meetings don't necessarily feel like a competition.
Oh, good.
They feel a little bit more collaborative, and conflict. I think in general, I'm more comfortable with conflict than others.
Yes,
especially a lot of women.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that those situations feel like competition to me, because I don't have to win the conflict. The conflict can simply exist.
I've grown into becoming comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That I would say that was not a
like we don't have to walk away all agreeing.
I wouldn't say in central Minnesota for a woman that was the most common, comfortable place
right.
to be.
And I actually think that it's more of a cultural than even a gender thing here, because there's a lot of, I mean, this is, I think, one of the reasons that I had that fabulous, amazing professional man walk up to me in a meeting and call me intimidating.
Yeah.
And when I said, am I intimidating or are you intimidated? He said, well, that's case in point. And I was like, I still didn't get it. I mean, I get it. Like right. I technically understand it, but I also think that he needs to own his own feelings in that, and that I wasn't doing anything wrong. So,
but he was uncomfortable.
Which he's maybe not used to, but but I wasn't uncomfortable.
Right. Even after he said that, I know you weren't uncomfortable.
Not really.
You told me about it and you're like, you just kind of looked at me and I went, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, I knew. I mean, that
okay. But like, what do you want me to do about it? Like, and I'm, the boundary, I love this explanation of boundaries, by the way. We're going to have to do this in a future thing, because we're a little over.
Yes.
But this explanation of boundaries is like the boundary is the limit of my behavior and what I can control. My boundary is not stopping you from doing anything.
Correct.
My boundary is what I'm willing to do, not do,
what I have control over,
what I have control over on my side of that boundary.
Yes.
And so
your side of the fence.
Yeah. So what purpose does it have coming up to me and calling me intimidating, other than to try and get me to do something different so that you can feel comfortable?
Well, that's a lot of communication, though.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about losing gracefully. It is how you communicate that.
Way to like bring it back.
Well,
thank you.
It is part of that, because it is in that communication. It is in that space. When losing sometimes is with, I was thinking about this. I think every day I lose at a variety of things. And by lose, I mean, I set out with one objective and we didn't land where that goal was. That's with people. That's with projects. That's with
I think every day I win and every day I lose, like both of those things.
And when it comes to emails, even like, sometimes it's in the communication of emails for me. It can be a real bugger. I have to look at an email a few times to make sure I'm saying things right. Yeah. Especially if there are things that I might not win. I can tell we're having a rather deep discussion about something important. And I'm like, okay, do I need to ask for a phone call at this point? Like, what's the better, because that's my better way of communication with a backup email type of thing. Yeah. It's like, how do we do this? So again, looking at a lot of situations is how can everybody win? Or if there's not a win-win in this, how do I help us back out of this?
And remember that a vast majority of communication is nonverbal. Yes. So how you sit, how you stand, how you hold your face, all of those, like your hand gestures, changes in your demeanor, changes in your micro behaviors, your micro expressions, the way you move your hands, if you sit too stiff or too loose, if you lean back or you lean forward, all of those things people will read.
How you breathe. Yeah.
Yeah. All of those things people will read if you are in the process of losing. So figuring out how to align your body's communications with your mouth's communications and your brain's communications in that moment is really important to the authenticity of that. And that only comes when you actually believe what you're saying. Because if you're just saying, oh, congratulations, that is not the same as congratulations.
Yeah.
They're two different things. They are. So, you know, check yourself and how you're saying, bless your heart. Because we all have our way of non-congratulating, congratulating, and that's not losing gracefully. Of course, there are times to not lose gracefully, but having control over that is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So be aware. We hope in this conversation you've caught on. It's not wrong to be competitive.
Nope.
I guess that's one thing I want to make sure got across. It's not wrong to be competitive. It's not wrong to be aggressive. It's not wrong.
Or assertive.
Like, none of those are wrong.
No.
Done well, done in your best interests, so forth. But it's also, and it's not wrong to lose. You're going to lose.
You're going to lose.
It's how you interpret that. It's if you take that on as failure, oh my God, I've lost and I'm a failure. Like if you unpack the entire life's experiences and every moment you weren't the most successful, that's not the moment. Don't do it. Leave it all in the backpack.
That'll be an expensive therapy session.
Yeah.
Or 12.
Or 12. Or
75.
That's right.
Yeah.
So learning to just fail and lose in that moment.
Yeah.
And then what have you learned from that moment? It's like, what am I learning from this? Oh, this wasn't a right fit. This was a good fit. And I communicated poorly. I wasn't speaking the same language as the client. All of the ways in my marriage I fail daily. Like there's just a variety of ways that I'm like, wow, I can learn from that.
We'll talk about that one next.
Yeah, I'm like,
so that's it for If These Heels Could Talk. Thank you so much for listening this week. We hope you've learned something. We hope you have
gained a little insight.
Perfect. Have a great day.
Bye now.